My name is Dr. David Fakunle. My mother and I, Dr. Mama Deborah Pierce Fakunle, are the co-founders of DiscoverME, RecoverME. We are an organization that uses storytelling as a healing practice. We believe that to begin the process of healing, you must first acknowledge your story and be empowered to tell your story. Because within the story, there is truth, there is healing, and there is power. So with the brief time that we have with you today, particularly Dr. Mama Deborah, we will lead you through our methodology to get you accompanied, comfortable with storytelling as a healing practice. So I thank you for your time and for your energy. I thank you for your vulnerability, your openness, and I hope that this is a healing experience for everyone. And I'll see you in a few days.
All right, be safe, David.
I will, Ma.
All right. As David said, we are DiscoverME, RecoverME, and we say the lion side because of a quote that we always use, and that's a proverb from Zimbabwe that says, "Until the lion tells his side of the story will always glorify the hunter." Okay, so it is imperative that we tell our own stories, because if somebody else is telling your story, they will tell it to their benefit. Okay, so we're going to do a little storytelling here today. Okay, and I've called this Songs and Stories because songs and stories are in fact living beings. Okay, songs can transform the way we feel and the way we think, as well as stories can do the same thing. So tell me your story, tell me your song is what I say, or sing me your song, right? And I ask this question, and you'll have to answer your questions in the chat. But if you were to write your autobiography, what would be the name of it? I would be curious to know, what would you name your autobiography if you were to write it at this time? And what is the title of your song? Is there a song that you like more than other songs because it speaks to you every time you hear it? If I was to write my autobiography, my name of my autobiography would be Sister Pierce's Daughter. Okay, now Sister Pierce, believe it or not, was my mother. She has transitioned. She transitioned more than 40 years ago, but she is with me every day because I remember her. I remember the things that I've learned from her. I look at my life sometimes and I say, wow, I'm acting just like she acted. And one of the gifts that she gave to me was the gift of song. She was, in fact, a singer. She was a Sunday school teacher. She was a parent who took in people who needed a home, and they happened to be some of my cousins. She took them in when I was like about 13 years old myself, and they were little kids. They were little kids. The youngest one was 8 months. The oldest one was 8 years. And my parents took them in and raised them as their own. So one of the things that I learned from my mother is that love is something that you do. It's not just something that you say. So if you, in fact, were to write your own autobiography, I would be interested to know what you would call it. And if, in fact, you were to write your own song, or if you have a song that brings meaning to your life, I would be interested to know the name of that song. Now, for myself, my song tends to change from time to time, but currently my favorite song that I often sing to myself is Lord, I Am So Grateful. Okay, because grateful, as we know, is a virtue. We also instill virtues in the stories that in the programming that we do, because a lot of times we have the audience extract the virtues that they hear in a story or that they hear in a song, which is what we're going to do today. Okay, but my song is Lord, I Am So Grateful, because I am grateful. I'm grateful to be here today. I'm grateful to have made it these many days through the pandemic that we're living in, to be in my right mind, to have health and strength and all of those things I'm truly grateful for. Okay, I'm trying to work here we go. Now, I happen to be wearing this same shirt that says storytelling, the original social media. And we know that storytelling is present in all communities, okay? if we go back in history, we know that they were always storytellers because before history was written down, it was shared orally. And our storytelling, we call ourselves griots from the African oral tradition of storytelling. And as griots, we know that griots did a lot of things in the community. They were the keepers of the culture. They were the keepers of the history. They often performed like the naming ceremonies. They settled disputes. They counseled people. They were praise singers and all of those things. And we know that stories do in fact have power because as shown on the slide, people are as healthy and confident as the stories they tell themselves. So you can tell yourself one thing that pulls you down, and you can tell yourself another thing that will lift you up. And those are some of the choices we have when we learn to incorporate the use of virtues in our daily lives, okay? Because we all have virtues. Virtues are just characteristics that are attributed to human beings. And I'm sure you know a virtue. Everybody knows the virtue. Patience is a virtue. Somebody probably has said that to you more than once. Patience is in fact a virtue. And there are many more, such as patience, love, cooperation, honesty. There are all kinds of virtues. So we know that 6 storytellers can make 6 nations. And not calling any names, I'll just say 6 storytellers can make 6 nations. And stories have power. Stories have power. They have the power to conquer fear. They have the power to dismantle barriers, to make your heart bigger, to make you smile, to bring healing, to empower the listener of the story. And songs are stories, they're just sung. Now, this is also one of my favorite songs. And I'm going to sing it for you right now. And I would only ask that you listen to it and see how, if at all, it speaks to you. And if it does speak to you, then I would encourage you to write what it says in the chat. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of the ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of the ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, sons of great vision. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, healers of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, wisdom of ages. We are our grandfather's prayers. We are our grandmother's dreamings. We are the breath of the ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one. Now, whether or not you know it, that's a song by Sweet Honey and the Rock. That's their picture on the side, and they do some very nice recordings. So if you haven't heard them, I would suggest that you take the opportunity to listen to some of their work. Now, I am hoping that you have gathered something from hearing the song, and I hope that you will write it in the chat. But as you work on that, I am going to tell the first story. But before we tell this, I forgot how the PowerPoint goes myself. All right, we know that story, that a story of a life. You know, your story is being lived out every day. Okay, your story is being lived out every day. And the one thing about living your story is that any day you can change it if you choose. You can make it go in another direction. You can give it some additional education. You can give it some additional opportunities because it is, in fact, your story. Now we know that stories are really an account of incidents or things that happen, or a statement of fact, or something of that nature. There are all kinds of stories. Now, when we tell stories, because we also have a after school program where we teach storytelling and other things of our history and culture, but every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, every story has that. And there is generally some kind of either conflict or something that's resolved in the story. That's not always the case, but most stories may have a problem or a situation that requires some attention. And by the time you get to the end of the story, you have satisfied the need for what was going on, whatever the problem or situation was. Now, everybody, we say that everybody is, in fact, a storyteller, but everybody may not be an intentional storyteller. Okay, we consider ourselves to be intentional storytellers because we will tell stories anywhere and many places. And we have done that with this process in places such as treatment facilities and juvenile facilities, schools and libraries, churches, and wherever we've been invited to. But storytelling is a very powerful part of our being. And if you think you're not a storyteller, you really, really are, because at some point you told about something. Okay, you told on somebody, you told who did it, you told why they did it, and why it wasn't you. And in doing that, you were in fact telling a story. And story, we encourage reading also, because a lot of times if you don't write your own stories or know where else to find them, you can always find them in a book, find them reading somewhere. So reading is a very important part of storytelling, if in fact you're going to be an intentional storyteller. I say sing your own song, tell your own story, speak your own truth. And this story that I'm about to share is called An African Story and Song. And I would like, as I requested before, for you to listen to the story and extract from it any virtues that you may hear, any advice that you may take, anything that may be helpful to you or may cause you to look at something differently. Okay? There's a village in West Africa which has a tradition. And that tradition is as follows. Whenever a woman in that village becomes pregnant, she is taken out into nature. All of the other women and young girls in the village will accompany her out in the nature. They may go out amongst the trees, out amongst the water, walking where they can hear and see the birds, walking where they can see the small animals, walking in safety, but walking in nature. And their purpose is to find for that unborn child its song. And they find this song, as I said, by listening to the sounds around them. And when they come up with the vibration that they hear from nature for that child, and when they come up with the rhythm that they're going to use to sing that song, and if in fact they add words to that song, they will use that song when the child is born. So they go back and they teach that song to everyone in the entire village. And on the day that the child comes to being to this side of life, the whole village will gather and sing that song to the child. Now, they also sing that song to the child as the child grows up, because when the child starts school, or when the child has a birthday, or when the child goes through the rites of passage, or any kind of celebration that comes upon the child's life, the entire village will gather and sing the child's song to the child. But more important to that than that is if that child does something that is contrary to the beliefs, the values, the virtues of the village, instead of reprimanding, beating, or making that child sit in the corner, the village will in fact use that opportunity to sing to that child its song. And they sing the song to the child because they want the child to know and be reminded that the child is loved. So that's the purpose of the song. The song is to let you know that you're loved and that you're not alone and that other people care about you. And even though they may not be there with you, you can take the song with you and use the song as you need. Now, they did that for a woman in the village who happened to have a daughter, and the daughter grew up and went through the stages of life until the daughter grew up and got married. And when the daughter got married, her husband took her to live in a village far away from her own. And in the village to which she went to live, they did not have that practice of utilizing a song. And over time, the young lady forgot her own song and forgot her own story. So she never sang the song to herself or to anyone else. And she never told her story, not even to herself, and certainly not to anyone else. And the story and the song were inside of her. And the story and the song were very unhappy being inside of her because they never got to breathe any fresh air. They were never sent out into the universe to be shared. And they were talking about it. They say, it is hard living in here when your story is not shared. It is hard being here where the song is never sung. We might need to get out of here. We might just need to leave here. And one day, when the wife was at home, now her husband had gone away. He had gone away because he had merchandise that he often took around and sold to other villages. And he was gone away, and she was in the house doing her household duties and decided to take a nap. And she sat in a chair, and I don't know if she really meant to go to sleep, but she did in fact go to sleep. And she did what a lot of us do when we go to sleep. She started snoring, okay? And she was like, And the song and the story say this might be the time for us to get up out of here. So the song jumped out of her. And the song said, oh, I'm so glad to be out of here. I'm just so glad to be out of here. It was terrible in there. I mean, gosh, we never got any fresh air. You know, it was hard to breathe. She never shared us. You know, so the song dropped out and the story came out too. And the story said, oh my God, it's so wonderful to just be out of here, to be out of here. And the song was so happy that it was out of there. The song said, I feel like singing. And the song started singing. The song said, breathe on me, breathe on me. Creative winds blow life to the heart of my soul to be what I can be. And the story started dancing. Breathe on me, breathe on me. Creative winds blow life to the heart of my soul to be what I can be. And the wife was still asleep. She was still asleep, snoring and everything. Now, after the story and the song got themselves together, then they got mad, okay? They said, you know, because she should not have done this to us. And I think in some kind of way, we ought to pay her back. So the story turned itself into a grand booba. Okay, now the grand booba is a part of an African outfit, just like we see on the screen here. And it's the big piece that goes over top of the pants and the shirt, and it comes all the way down to the ground. And this one is made out of Nigerian lace. And they're generally worn for special occasions. And if not special occasions, they are certainly worn by special people. So the story took its booba self over to the door and hung itself on a hook right by the door. And the song, not to be undone, decided that it would transform itself into a pair of snakeskin drum shoes that a man would wear, okay, and took them over by the door and sat them at the door. Now, the wife knew nothing about it. She got up and went back into the kitchen and started doing what she had to do. And then the husband came home. Now, the husband got inside the door. He saw the booba. He saw the shoes. And he said, oh my goodness, we must have company. Somebody must be visiting us. Somebody very important is visiting us here today. So he came on in and he said to his wife, who's visiting us? Who's here today? And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. There's nobody here. And he said, I mean, there must be somebody here because at the door, I see a grand booba, a rather expensive grand booba, and I see some snakeskin drum shoes. So I certainly would like to know who's visiting us today. And the wife said, there's nobody visiting us today. I don't know what you're talking about. Now, the husband, in his travels, had met with some elders. That was one of the things he did when he went to sell his wares in other villages. He would take opportunity to sit before the elders and gather from them some wisdom. And on one of his stops, he had sat with the elder, and the elder shared a story with him. And the moral from the story was, you should not believe all that your eyes see, and you should hide your anger until tomorrow. So he started running that over in his mind. Okay. You know, you should not believe all that your eyes see. You should hide your anger until tomorrow. You should not believe. So he said, well, I'm just gonna ask because I did see this nice, I mean, really nice grand booba hanging at the door and these nice shoes. So I'm gonna like ask you one more time, is who's visiting us, or who did visit us, or who was here today? And the wife said, I do not know what you're talking about. There was nobody here today. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know nothing about any booba. I don't know nothing about any shoes. Now, let me say this. The wife couldn't see the shoes anyway. Only the husband could see the shoes and the booba. She couldn't even see them because they were paying her back for trying to suffocate them on the inside. So the story and the song did that to get even with her. So the husband, after reminding himself that All of his eyes see, he should not believe. He should hide his anger until tomorrow. Decided to get his sleep mat and just leave the house. So he got his sleep mat. He went down to the village worship place and he rolled his mat out and he said, maybe I'll just sleep here for the night, because certainly all that your eyes see, you must not believe, and you should save your anger until tomorrow. So he left, okay? And after he left, the story transformed itself back into a story, and the song transformed itself back into the song, and they left too. Now the wife was in the house alone, scratching her head, saying, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know anything about no booba. I don't know anything about no shoes. Nobody visited me today. I mean, I just don't know what's going on. So she finished what she had to do in the house and she went upstairs to prepare herself to go to sleep. And she did just that. Now the husband was down in the worship building in the village, and he was on the floor, and he laid out on his mat, and he was trying to go to sleep, and he had gone to sleep for a little while, but he kind of noticed as he turned over, he kept seeing like some sparks popping off like in the air, and he didn't know what it was. And then after a while, he started hearing something, and the sparks of light were talking. They were talking about the things that had happened in the houses where they were today. Because what we may not know is that when lights go off, they're not gone, okay? They get together and they talk about what happened in the place that they lit. And such was the case. So that is what happened. The lights was talking about the things that they saw during the day. And then all of a sudden, another light came in, and the other said, so what took you so long to get here? Where have you been? And that light said, ooh, y'all should have been in my house today. Y'all should have been in my house. They said, well, what happened? He said, in the house today, the wife went to sleep in a chair, and she was snoring. And a story jumped out of her, and a song jumped out of her. And at first, they were so glad to be out of her. They was like, oh, it's just a wonder. It's a wonder. They started singing and they started dancing, and then they got mad. And they say, we are going to fix her. So the story turned itself into a grand booba, and the song turned itself into a pair of drum shoes. And then the husband came home. Well, when the husband came home and started asking the wife about the shoes and the booba, the wife didn't know what he was talking about. And he kept saying something to himself about all that your eyes see, you must not believe, and save your anger till tomorrow, and all this kind of stuff. And he was saying all that stuff, and then he got his little mat and he left. Now the husband, who was in the temple, heard that story. And he said to himself, he said, oh, so that's what happened. She lost her story and she lost her song. She didn't even know what happened. He said, well, I will just stay here tonight and I will go home in the morning and see what's up. So he got up in the next morning, having heard what had transpired in his own house from the lights. On his way home, he decided to pick for her some flowers, which he did. He picked some lovely, lovely flowers. And he went in the house and he said, good morning, and I want to give you these flowers. And as nicely as he could, he said, please, would you please share with me your story and share with me your song? And she looked at him and she said, what story? What song? So my question to you is, what do you learn from this story? What do we know from hearing this story? Because we should have gathered something, even if we gathered it from the name and the things written under the name. Okay? So I don't know how to look in the chat. Do I to see anything that anybody's writing in the chat? Let me see if I can do that, because this is not my strong suit. May I say that also? Okay, I got some chats. Did anybody write anything? Oh, I think those chats. Okay, I think this was about the song. Somebody wrote powerful. It connect me to remembering how powerful and special each of our children and we are. Also, how connected we are to one another. Oh, that's wonderful. And somebody else said, love, sweet honey in the rock. Ella's song is a staple for the group I sing with. All right, Charm City Labor Chorus. All right, that's wonderful. And somebody said, is that David? Yes, that's David in the picture. That's David in the picture doing one of his shows. I think he was doing a show for Red Bull at that time. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to write some comments about the story that we just heard, because those comments were about the song. So we should have something to say about the story, because I hope we gathered something from the story, because there are some, and a lot of times what we do is, as when we get together and we look for the virtues that we may see in the story, okay? Because certainly I would say that the husband, he displayed some patience, okay? And he displayed some, I guess, love, because he didn't go off. He tried to remember the lessons that he learned from the elders, and he utilized them, because the wife didn't know what he was talking about, and he didn't know what she was talking about. And oftentimes that's the basis for friction between people, but he didn't allow that to happen. Okay, he didn't allow that to happen. So if we look for some other things that come out of the story, certainly we know that we should hide our anger. Okay, we should hide our anger. We should not pop off, because a lot of times what we see may not be what it is. Okay, we should not react to the first thing that we see, because it can be something different. All right, now, and that was one of the things that, well, I got from the story, because I'm telling the story, okay, is that you should hide your anger. You should not act out on your anger immediately, because it might not even be necessary once you find out what's going on. The other part of the story that I really like, and that I often like to ask people to have conversations about, is what happens when you cut the lights out, okay? What happens to the brightness of the light? Does it really go away? Did it take any energy from you that it can actually share? Because that's what happened in the story. The light got the energy of the room that it was in. And so that night they sat around and they talked about it. Now I'm sure the lights probably aren't talking about it, but it's something that you can consider, okay? It's something that you can consider. All right? So nobody's giving me any comments about the story. Okay, let me see. Okay, here goes some. Let me see. All right, good. Also, keeping the story inside of us can lead to anger, resentment, and frustration inside of us. That's what I get from the story. That's very good. Thank you. If we lose our own story, we lose a part of ourselves. Very good. It can be healing to release our story and set it free. All right, y'all. The song and story were forgotten. Was so sad. Truly, truly. That's right. That's why you have to sing your own song, tell your own story, speak your own truth. All right? Because stories and songs, they can change the atmosphere of a room. They can change the way you feel. I know a lot of times I sing to and for myself, okay? Because I truly know that I can change the way I feel singing, okay? Because it's very hard to be mad when you're singing, okay? It's very hard to frown when you're singing, okay? So I can change the way I feel, and I do it a lot, okay? Just by singing. And I tell people I don't need an audience, because I am my own audience. So I sing for myself. More than even when I sing in front of other people, I say, first of all, I am singing to myself. Because if in fact my singing does nothing for me, then I cannot expect it to do anything for anybody else, okay? All right. So we say stories and songs act directly on the listener to bring about healing and spiritual growth. All right. I hope I am letting these people in because I am not. Okay, I hope you, I do too. I love that. I love, oh, people love singing. Okay. All kinds of good comments here. You are so welcome to those who are saying thank you. Yeah. All right. All right. So we're going to move along a little bit here. I hope. I tell you, this is not my, oh, okay. Because we're gonna do another story. And one of the things that we also often do when we do stories, so I suggest you all pay attention here, is we will tell a story up until a certain point, and then we will ask those in the audience to end that story. Okay, because you can end your story the way you feel, from what you know, from what you believe, from your own creativity. You can end any story. Okay. Now, before I tell a story, I have a couple books up here that I utilize and I recommend, and one is this first one here, 30 Days to Tame Your Tongue. Okay. All right. Because we know that tongues have power. All right. They have the power, they can either heal, or they can kill from the same tongue. They can uplift or they can put down from the same tongue. Okay. They can be of help or they can be of harm. All right. So we must be conscious of our tongue because it is a weapon, so as it says in the Bible. And it is a weapon because I'm sure you've heard some people use it to like, oh my goodness, really? I be like sometimes I don't even want to hear that because it shouldn't be that bad. But that's all in the tongue, and that's all in the decisions that we make, and that's all in how we live out our virtues. Okay, because we all have virtues. We all have the power to do the gifts that have been given to us, the gifts of character. So I'm going to move over to this side where we have the virtues chart. Okay, and that's just example of some of the virtues listed there on the chart. Okay, caring. We can all be caring if we choose to be caring. We can all show compassion if we choose to show compassion. Okay, it's all choices in life. All right, we can be creative. We can be excellent. We can be helpful. We can display humility and humbleness and anything that we choose that we want to do. My virtues for this year, I listed, and I write them a lot of times when I post on Facebook, is I am grateful, I am hopeful, and I am helpful. Okay. All of those are virtues. That is my 2021 intention, to be grateful, hopeful, and helpful. Now I'm going to use some of my other virtues because one of my favorite virtues is forgiveness. Okay. Forgiveness, because I've learned over life that forgiveness is more for me than anybody that I may ever forgive. Okay. It is for me. Because if I carry around the resentment or the anger that I have towards you, half time you don't even know nothing about it. I'm just carrying it around and making it a burden for myself. So I must forgive you in order to free myself. And that's what I choose to do. Now, the next book, I just recommend this book because this is a cute little book, particularly for young people and for old people. But it's a great book. It's called The Rabbit Listens. And I brought this for my grandson, and he just loves this book because it's an example of the fact that sometimes all you need is for somebody to listen. Okay? You don't always need people to tell you how to solve the problem. You don't always need people to give you their opinion of the problem. Sometimes you just need somebody to listen, okay? Because if they listen and allow you to speak, you will come to some conclusions for yourself, okay? Which is what happens in this book. So this is a cute little book that I recommend highly. I recommend it highly. Now, I do not have on my watch, so I have no idea what time it is. But anyway, I'm going to start this next story, and what we're going to do, and I need you guys to listen because I'm only going to tell it up to a certain point, and then I need to hear some endings from you. And you can write them in the chat, and then I'll read some of the endings. And then if we have time, I will end the story as I know it. Okay, because the one thing about a story is that I may tell it, you may tell it, and somebody else may tell it, and we'll all tell it differently. Okay, and that's fine. That's fine, you know. And I may tell it today and tell it differently tomorrow. Okay, and that's what stories do, and that's how stories are. But I'm going to start this one this way. There was a village. And if you notice, most of my stories are related to Africa. Okay, so I put them in villages and stuff like that because I'm a griot, and a griot is an African storyteller. Okay, so my stories will have us in them. Okay, let me just say it like that. We will be in my stories. All right, but there was a village that had a chief, and in this village, the chief was very wise, you know, but sometimes they may not know as much as they think they know. And sometimes they may test people to see if people are as wise as they are. So one day this chief got up and he decided that he would have one of his servants. He gave him something to do. He said, I want you to go to the market and bring me back the best piece of meat that they sell in the market. So the servant, he did as he was told, and he came back and he presented to the chief a tongue. And the chief said, okay, I'll just take the tongue. And, you know, chief said, now I want you to go back to the market and I want you to buy for me the worst piece of meat in the market. And the servant came back and he brought the chief a tongue. So the best piece of the best piece of meat in the market, according to the servant, was a tongue. And the worst piece of meat in the market, according to the servant, was a tongue. I want you to keep that in mind as I tell you this story, the healing tongue. There was a chief, a very rich chief, who had a wife and 2 children. This chief had everything he could ever want because his wealth was very extreme. And his wife was very beautiful, as a chief's wife would be, and he loved her. And this chief had 2 children. Now his 2 children, who may have been preteens or somewhat around that way, were somewhat of a disappointment to the chief. Why, you ask? His children never smiled. His children looked weak and withdrawn. His children were thin. His children didn't play. His children didn't laugh. His children were frightening to the other children and even some of the elders in the village. Now the chief, he gave his children everything. Everything he thought they wanted, everything, because they didn't tell him anything, everything it looked like they may want. He just gave them toys, and he gave them clothes, and he gave them gadgets, and he gave them all kinds of things. Yet his children didn't smile. His children didn't laugh. His children didn't play with the other children. His children looked weak and sad and scary. Now, one day the chief was out in his village and he saw a poor man with his 2 children. who were around the same age as the chief's children. And the poor man's children were smiling and laughing and playing with the other children and saying hello and talking to the elders, and their skin was beautiful and their eyes were bright and they just looked wonderful. And the chief said to himself, look at those children. I want you to bring that man to me so that I can ask him some questions. And so his servants did as they were told. They brought the poor man to the chief's compound and sat him before the chief. And the chief said to him, I saw you with your children. They looked rather healthy and happy. What is it that you give them? And the poor man said, I feed my children from the meat of the tongue. And the chief said, oh, okay, thank you, thank you. And he dismissed the man and he called his servants and he sent them back to the market and he said to them, get me every kind of tongue that they have at that market. And they did as he said, and they came back with all this tongue and they started cooking tongue and he started feeding his children baked tongue, fried tongue, stewed tongue, tongue soup, tongue salad, tongue sandwiches, tongue little, he had the cooks roll them into balls like tongue meatballs, all kinds of tongue. And his children remained as they were. His children were weak. His children were sad. His children looked scary. His children did not play. His children did not smile. And after having done that for weeks, he got angry. And he said, how dare that poor man give me false information? This is what I am going to do. I am going to take his children and give him mine. And that is what the chief did. He had his servants go to the poor man and tell him that the chief had decided that he could have the chief's children and the chief wanted his children. So, because the chief was the chief and the poor man had to obey the directives of the chief, he sent his children, after letting them know how much he loved them, to live with the chief. And the chief sent his children to live with the poor man. Now, like I told you before, a lot of times we have the audience in the story because the story certainly, well, it could, but it wouldn't be a good story if it ended there. So I need you to tell me your ending to the story once the chief's children came to live with the poor man and the poor man's children went to live with the chief. Okay? I'm going to give you a few minutes to write me some answers in the chat, and you can end your story however you choose to end your story. But let me say, end your story in more than a sentence, okay? I need something to happen in the ending of your story, okay? You just please don't tell me they live happily ever after or something like that, okay? From what you've heard, particularly from the story from that intro this story about the tongue, and from what you heard, I need you to end the story, okay? End the story. I'm going to give you a few minutes, and while I give you a few minutes, I'm going to go and see where my watch is so I can get an idea of how much time there is. All right. Okay, are we giving me some endings to the story? Okay, because I think we're overtime, but nobody has said anything to us, so we can finish this. We can go with some endings to the story. What have I done? No, I don't want that page. I want the other page. Where is, oh, here we go. Okay, let's see. The chief's children. Oh, okay. Y'all putting some answers in here. Okay. All right. Let's read some. Okay, let me see. Okay. The chief's children did beautifully, for the poor man had exposed them to his own tongue. Oh, that is so good. Okay. That is so good. Let me see. The poor man's children were sad at first because they're always from away from their dad, but they began sharing stories from their lives with the king's family and brought, oh my goodness, see, listen to these storytellers. That's a good one too. Don't forget to do this. Oh, somebody said don't forget to do the survey. All right, I hope y'all be able to find it. So thank you for participating in this session. Before you leave, please fill out the survey. Oh, okay. They haven't kicked us off yet. We good. The king's children are sad at first because they miss all of their things and servants, but soon they learn to accept the beauty of a simple life. Okay, okay, listen to all these answers. The poor man could say, I love you. You matter. You are special. All right, go ahead, y'all. The chief watched his own children bloom and become compassionate, lovingly engaged children. He had not spent much time with the poor man's children, so went to see them to see how they were doing. Those children remained happy and resilient even after the chief yelled at them. Oh, y'all so good. I don't even think I need to end the story. All right, because I see you are getting the idea. Okay. What the because what happened in the story was that after a while, the poor man's children that went to live with the chief began to look like the chief's children, to begin to lose their happiness, to lose their their joy and those kinds of things. But the chief's children that were with the poor man began to blossom, as some of you have said here in the text, because he shared, like somebody said, he shared with them from his tongue. He did just that. Each day after he came back from work, he would tell them what he saw, where he'd been. He talked to them. He would read them stories. He would sing them songs. He spent time talking and sharing with his children. That was why they were happy. And the chief only spent time buying things for his children, never spending or giving them of himself, which is why they were sad. So that is how that story ends. All right. Great people in the audience. Now I'm gonna show my last slide. It's starting already. That is my daughter and I sitting up there. I tell this is my story in pictures. I have 2 children, both of whom are doctors. One is a medical doctor and one is a PhD. That's David. So my hashtag that I use is Black Mother of Black Doctors. So this is my daughter, Mary, who is a surgeon. Okay, she is in San Francisco doing her residency in urology. She'll be starting her 4th year of residency in June, I think it is. Yep, so she's in her 3rd year. She'll start her 4th year. So this is, with the exception of how to get in contact with us, I think I have one more page. Let me see if I can get this out the middle. Okay, so that you can find us at our website, DiscoverME, RecoverME. You can find us at Gmail, same thing. You can find us on Facebook, same thing. And you can find us on Instagram.